C. Bernstein of Boynton Beach, Florida, and Rabbi Lizzie Hademan of Mishkan, Chicago will be officiating.
Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu, our God and God of our ancestors, our rock and our Redeemer. 1,000 years in your sight are as a passing day, an hour of night. Our generations come and go, while you endure forever. We are always in your hand, O God, in death as in life, trusting in your love and in your judgments. O merciful God, strengthen all of us who are mourning the loss of Adele Bernstein. Help us to look beyond this moment. Help us to realize that death cannot destroy the bonds of your everlasting love. Sustain us with the knowledge of our faith, that you will not abandon our souls to the grave, that you will not allow your faithful to suffer oblivion. For you, O God, have taught us the way of life. Through you, our refuge, we gain eternity. And let us say, Amen. During times of mourning and sorrow, it's a time-honored Jewish tradition to turn to the biblical book of Psalms for words of comfort and consolation. It gives me great honor to call upon Rabbi Lizzie Hademan, my sister-in-law, with assistance from my nephew Judah, to lead us in the 121st Psalm.
Shir lema'alot, Esaina el heharim, me'ayin yavo Ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai, Ose shamayim ve'aretz, ayiten lamut raglecha. Al yanum shomrecha, hine lo yanum v'lo ishan, shomer Yisrael. Adonai shomrecha, Adonai tzilcha, al yad yeminecha, yomam hashemesh lo yakeka v'yareach balayla. Adonai yishmorcha mikora, yishmor et nafshecha. Adonai yishmor tzedcha uvoecha me'ata ve'ad olam. A song for ascending. I lift my eyes to the mountains. Where will my help come from? My help comes from the Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your guardian will not slumber. The guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God will be your protection, a guardian at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from all harm, will guard your life. God guards your comings and your goings from now until forever.
The book of Proverbs speaks of the Eshet Chayil, the woman of valor, that I'd like to read you this passage now dedicate it to Adele's memory. Eshet chayil mi imtza v'rachok mipninim michra, batach balev bala v'shalal lo yechzar, gmalatu tov v'lo ra kol yemei chayeha, kapa parsa leoni v'yadeha shilcha le'evyon, oz v'hadar levusha v'tischak leyom acharon, pi apotcha v'chochma v'torat chesed al leshona, Sophia halichot beita velechem atzlut lo tochel. Kamu vaneha veyashruha bala vayahalala. Rabot banot asu chayel viat alit al kulana. Sheker achen vehevel hayofi. Isha yirat Adonai hiti talal. Tenula mipri yadeha vihalaluha vasharim maaseha. What a precious find is an Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor. Her worth is far beyond rubies. Her husband puts his confidence in her and lacks no good thing. She is good to him, never bad, all the days of her life. She opens her hand to the needy and extends her hand to the poor. She is clothed with strength and splendor. She looks to the future cheerfully. She opens her mouth with wisdom. Her tongue is guided by kindness. She oversees the activities of her household and never eats the bread of idleness. Her children come forward and bless her. Her husband praises her and says, "Many women have done superbly, but you surpass them all." Charm is deceitful and beauty vain, but a God-revering woman is much to be praised. Extol her for the fruit of her hand. Wherever people gather, her deeds speak her praise. We are gathered on short notice in large numbers to recall with love and reverence a woman who never stood more than 5'2", yet was a true giant, a truly extraordinary woman. Hodel bat Asher Vebela, Adele Bernstein of blessed memory. She was the beloved wife of my late grandfather, Norman Bernstein Zichrono Livracha, of blessed memory. Beloved mother of my father Charles, his wife Roberta, my Aunt Barbara, and her uncle and her husband Stephen Lowe. Cherished grandmother of me and my wife Ariella Reback, Aryeh Bernstein, Henry Bernstein, and his wife Rabbi Lizzie Heidemann. Rebecca and her husband Skip Curtis, Sandy Lowe and Shana Lowe. And finally, she was the much beloved great-grandmother of my children, Sam, Noam, and Esther, Charlie and Ellie, and Judah Lev, whose bris Adele attended and hosted exactly 8 weeks ago today. Adele was also the fond sister-in-law of my Aunt Frida Olix Bernstein, and beloved aunt and great-aunt to her children and grandchildren. And she was a beloved cousin and friend to so many more. I'd like to give special acknowledgement, even though they're not here today, to my in-laws, Sheila and Jerry Reback, who grew very close to Adele over the 19 years that Ariella and I have been married. Also, Ariella's sister, Danielle, and her husband, Dr. Harel Deutsch, have been very close to her, as have their children, Alana, Zachary, and Aiden, who visited Adele regularly, included her in all of their family events, and, like my children, called her Bubby. How does one begin to sum up 103 years? think of the watershed moments that Adele experienced. She lived through the crucible years of World War I, the Depression, and World War II. The trials of these early decades of her life shaped her into a model of values and decency that have inspired 4 generations of family and friends. Looking out this beautiful crowd, see that many of us attended the milestone celebrations in recent years. Her 90th birthday, 95th birthday, 100th birthday. At those events, we heard extensive accounts of Adele's remarkable life. I will share some key pieces of that story. Aside from Adele herself, I want to acknowledge 2 key sources for me. My father, Chuck, through his genealogical account of our family, and Rabbi Elliot Gertel, who interviewed my grandmother during his tenure at Congregation Rudfeit Tzedek and recorded her oral history. Of course, I will also include my own impressions and those shared with me by other key members of the family. You know, it's fitting that Grandma died in the summer. She hated the cold, and her apartment always felt like 100 degrees. She wouldn't have wanted her family to schlep out to a cemetery in the middle of a Chicago winter. On a serious note, though, it's also significant that she passed this week because of where we are, the Jewish people, in our annual Torah reading cycle. Tomorrow in synagogues around the world, we read Parshat Re'eh. In it, we see part of Deuteronomy's blueprint for creating a society rooted in social justice. Efes ki lo yihye becha evyon. There shall be no needy among you. Ki yihye becha evyon. If, however, there are needy people among you, me'achad achecha, from among you, be'achad sha'arecha, and any of your gates in your land, lo ta'ametz et levavcha, velo tikpotz et yadcha me'achicha ha'evyon. Do not harden your heart and shut your hand against the needy. Rather, the text says, Ki fatoach tiftach et yadcha. You must certainly open your hand and lend whatever your neighbor needs. Give readily and have no regrets when you do so. For in return, God will bless you in all of your efforts and in all of your undertakings. The Torah's instruction to support the needy, to do so willingly, and to do so wholeheartedly and without regret, certainly includes monetary support, and it also extends far beyond that form of aid. In fact, the Talmud teaches that gemilut chasadim, acts of loving kindness, are potentially more impactful than tzedakah, charity, for 3 distinct reasons. First, charity is generally provided only to the poor, while gemilut chasadim, acts of loving kindness, can be given to the rich and to the poor. Charity is given only to the living, while gemilut chasadim can be bestowed upon the living or dead, as we are doing today with kavod hamet, honoring the deceased. And finally, tzedakah, charity, is done only with money, while Gemilut Chasadim is done through money or any kind of personal assistance. Go ahead. Grandma Adele embodied the spirit of these teachings throughout her life. She exemplified kindness, generosity, and open-heartedness. She didn't just talk the talk, she walked the walk. She did every act of tzedakah and gemilut chasadim that the Torah and Talmud speak about. She visited the sick, she comforted the bereaved, and helped the needy. Always, as the sages say, b'sever panim yafot, with a cheery disposition, never with an ounce of regret. She was patoach tiftach. She surely opened her hand and her heart. Grandma Adele was born on Friday, June 5th, 1914, at 11 p.m. to Bela and Oscar Shore in Philadelphia. The timing was important. For years, she assumed that her birthday was June 6th because her family told her that she was born on Shabbos, which begins at sundown Friday night and extends through Saturday. Indeed, throughout her life, the last 4 digits of her phone number were 6614 after her observed birthday. And a hat tip to my cousin Avi, who pointed that out to me a couple of years ago. I never realized that her phone number was related to her birthday. As an adult, Adele applied for a passport and discovered on her birth certificate her real birthday of June 5th. From then on, her birthday became a 2-day celebration, just like a Jewish 2-day Yontif. When she was very young, Adele's parents moved and settled on the south side at 56th and Prairie. Oscar struggled to make it in various sectors of the food business. Tragically, Adele's mother, a young woman still in her 20s, took ill with tuberculosis. Adele was sent to live in Philadelphia with maternal grandparents while her mother was sent to a sanitarium for TB patients. Bela died in February of 1920 when Adele was only 5 and a half. Adele went on to live with her father Oscar's sister and her husband, Bella and Samuel Grossman, for 2.5 years in Chester, Pennsylvania. Adele grew very close to their daughter, her cousin Sadie, who was 9 years older, and embraced Adele like a younger sister. Adele always adored Sadie. I personally have fond memories of Sadie and her husband Fred Abrams of blessed memory. And it was beautiful to see how the close bond of Sadie and Adele carried over to following generations and to the present day. Despite young Adele's great loss, she benefited from close relationships with all of her relatives in Philadelphia on both her father's and mother's sides. This gave rise to a favorite adage of Adele's, "Life is with people." Young Adele moved back and forth between Philadelphia and Chicago as Oscar tried to stabilize his situation. A little over a year ago, I spent time with Grandma. I came to town on her 102nd birthday, June 6, 2016. And as she was doing a lot in recent years, she was reflecting on these early years of her childhood. And she happened to reflect that day on her father, who chose never to remarry. Oscar was actually acquainted with a young woman in Chester, Pennsylvania named Tanya Bloom, who was known and respected by the entire family. He focused his energy, though, on caring for Adele. He did not want his daughter to have a stepmother. Adele reflected this to me a year ago and said that her father sacrificed his life and happiness for her sake, even though Adele said that he would have been happier, and Adele may well have benefited from Tanya as a mother figure. We, of course, will never know, but suffice it to say, Oscar was very devoted to his daughter. While in Chicago, Oscar saved some money to purchase a gas station with a small apartment on top on West Jackson Boulevard. That's where he and Adele settled for a while. Adele attended the Ulysses S. Grant School. A tradition of the school, resulting from being named after a distinguished president, was that a student each year would be tapped to speak at a school assembly about an important event in American history. While in 8th grade, she was called upon to speak about the Battle of Shiloh at the Grand Army of the Republic reunion at the main Chicago Public Library. Adele's academic achievements such as this were truly remarkable for a young girl whose home life and family situation were less than fully stable. Till her final days, she loved learning and intellectual pursuits. Adele returned to Chester, Pennsylvania for a time to finish junior high school and begin high school. This school was ahead of its time in requiring both boys and girls to take both shop and home economics. As a result, Adele learned how to splice a wire and do all sorts of handy-dandy things around the house, normally associated, at least in those days, with the man of the house. She carried these skills throughout her life. Adele returned to Chicago as a teenager and graduated from Marshall High School. In those days, it was unusual for teenage women to learn how to drive, but she did. It was a skill she put to good use for 81 years until she voluntarily gave up driving at age 97. At Marshall, the school offered volunteer service programs in place of a study hall period. Adele opted during that time to read to and provide guidance for visually impaired children from across the city. In her high school yearbook, she said her ambition was to work with the blind. She unknowingly anticipated her life with Norman, who was, of course, vision impaired. Supporting the blind was a passion of hers throughout her life, as was fighting consumption, which afflicted her mother. But as far as blindness is concerned, she really stuck with caring for that cause. For the 30-plus years that she lived in Hyde Park, she volunteered at the Rudfait Tzedek Braille Institute, transcribing books and periodicals to share wisdom and light with those who physically could not see. Remarkably, Adele maintained close friendships throughout her life with friends from her childhood. And these included friends from high school and then college. She attended Crane Junior College and later graduated from White Junior College. After graduating, her father announced that he got a job at a fruit store on the South Side, and he and Adele moved to 7654 South Phillips. Upon her return to the South Side, Adele began working for the Sac Realty Company, a professional association that continued for some 5 decades. Meanwhile, Adele had a friend named Bernice who lived on Western Avenue near a candy store owned by Ida and George Edelson. Bernice had a Halloween party and invited the Edelsons and Adele. Soon after that, Adele ran into Ida and her mother, Rebecca Bernstein, outside the Avalon Theater. They asked how Adele liked living on the South Side. She replied, "The neighborhood is nice, but I don't know anybody." Ida said, "I have a kid brother. He knows a lot of people. I'll have him call you and introduce you." No call. Ida and Adele met up a few months later and had the same conversation. "Didn't my brother call you?" Ida asked. "No, he did not." Years later, Adele heard that Ida had plenty to say to her brother when she got home. Ida said, "Norman, you don't have to marry her, just introduce her to some people." A friend of Norman's, Max Fink, was with him at the time and said, "Norm, if you're not going to call her, give me her number." But then Norman kicked into high gear and he insisted, "I'll call her." Norman's mother piped in, "You'll like her. She's a Shayna and a Kleina, pretty and petite." Their first date was April 15th, 1939, at the Southtown Theater on 63rd Street. The entertainer that night was a young, up-and-coming comedian named Bob Hope. Their second date was a double date with their friends, I guess originally Norman's friends, Laverne and Honey Much, who remained lifelong friends. Honey asked them on that double date, which again was just the second time Norman and Adele were out, Honey asked them when they were going to get married. By the way, Honey, may she rest in peace, made amazing chocolate chip cookies. 7 weeks later, on Adele's 25th birthday, Norman popped the question. They were married February 4th, 1940, thus officially beginning their journey of building, sharing, and walking life's path together for nearly 51 years. My dad, Chuck, was born in June 1941. My Aunt Barbara followed 7 years later. Norman worked hard selling goods on consignment to his local clientele in the shadow of the steel mills on the South Side. It was hard work, particularly since labor disputes would occasionally shut down the plants, leaving his customers with no income. So with both kids in school, Adele returned to Sac Realty, initially part-time and later full-time. She was a loyal and valued employee of Sac Realty Company over a span of more than 50 years, where in 1957 she was promoted from bookkeeper secretary to head of the insurance department, a job previously held by only men, and she held that job for over 30 years. She was never afraid to speak her mind, even to her boss, and she earned respect as a result. And she worked with SAC until her retirement in 1984. Years later, when Ariella and I were living in Cleveland, we lived in a home on an acre of land, and we built a playground for our small children and their friends. Since I was the rabbi of the community, we frequently entertained large groups of people, especially families with small children. On her first visit to our home, Grandma, then only 89, admonished us to purchase an umbrella policy in case anyone is ever, God forbid, injured on our property. My wife, Ariella, an accomplished attorney, was very impressed with this advice and immediately purchased such a policy. Thank God we have not as yet had to put such a policy to use, but we are grateful to Grandma for the sound advice born out of her professional expertise. My father, Chuck, married my mother, Roberta, and Barbara married Steve Lowe. Adele regarded Roberta and Steve as her own children. Adele often bantered that her children made it easy for her, and that her son's family had 3 sons, me, Lou or Arye, and Henry, and Barbara had 3 daughters, my cousins Rebecca, Sandy, and Shayna. To offer a glimpse into Adele's role as a parent and the values that she imparted to all of us across generations, I'd like to share some remarks compiled by my Aunt Barbara that she shared at Adele's 90th and 95th birthday celebrations. She said at the time, the 90th, as we gathered to celebrate my mother's 90th birthday, I thought about what I've learned from her. She has several endearing traits. I bet you'll recognize them. My mother was always organized, and she wanted what we wanted. When I was little, I wanted very much to join a brownie troop, but the troop in our neighborhood had a long waiting list. My mother knew I wanted to be a brownie, and she took steps to make it happen. My mother volunteered not to be just a troop leader, but she became the neighborhood chairman of the Girl Scouts, a position she held for several years. She met frequently with all the troop leaders in the area, professionally managing the business affairs of the district. I would never have been a brownie if she had not volunteered. My mother taught me, Barbara continues, at a young age to be neat and respectful when shopping. And these were things that I learned too when I had the great misfortune of being dragged clothes shopping by my grandmother. But what Barbara says is so poignant. But Grandma said, always hang up all garments and always remove all clothes from the dressing room. Part of this instruction related to neatness. The next shopper did not want our rejects in her dressing room, and the clothes should not be wrinkled. But the most important reason to handle clothes properly was out of respect for the store clerks. They were there to help us, not to be our maids. Aunt Barbara said that I've tried to instill these behaviors and values in my own children, not always with as much success as my mom had. My mom loves family history, and because of this, she saves everything, notes, scraps, pictures. Imagine my surprise when on one of her visits to Lincoln, Massachusetts, she presented me with the original hospital bill for my birth. $85.70 for a 6-day stay. Who would have thought she'd save that for 50 plus years? And what a nice thing for me to have now. And give Mom a scrapbook and a glue stick, and she creates magic. Major events in our lives and those of our children are preserved in beautiful scrapbooks filled with cards and notes, capturing memories of weddings, births, and bas mitzvahs. They are treasures we enjoy again and again. My mother loves and deeply values her friends and family, and she has always tried to attend major events of her friends and family whether or not they were close geographically. She frequently flew to California, Philadelphia, Boston, New York, or Florida to attend some funerals, but mostly joyous events. My mom came to most of the kids' birthdays in Lincoln, Mass., and all graduations, elementary, high school, and college. When I was growing up, some of her closest friends were women with whom she went to high school and junior college. Some of these women are still her friends more than 70 years later. This was written 13 years ago. Tragically, most of them are gone. Barbara says, I followed her example and I'm still friends with someone whom I met in kindergarten in 1953. Of course, these words by my Aunt Barbara resonate very much with me, my brothers, my parents, our entire side of the family as well. My brothers and I were incredibly blessed that in our childhood, all four of our grandparents were very much a part of our lives and all lived nearby on the south side. Aryeh and I both attended Kenwood Academy for high school, and what a treat it was to be able to pop in and say hi to Grandma Adele and Grandpa Norman on our way home from school. She would often look out her window facing 51st and Cornell when we were walking home, and if we saw her in the window, we'd run up and say hi and have a snack. I have many fond memories of sleepovers with Grandma and Grandpa. As a younger child, I enjoyed walking down Pulaski Avenue from their apartment in Oak Lawn where they lived for a time and picking the tomatoes at a garden of a neighbor. And then I also enjoyed Grandma's affectionate bum bum butts and Eskimo nose kisses. Although years later I reluctantly asked her not to do that anymore with my son Sam because he started headbutting his friends in school and saying, bum bum butts, bum bum butts. That wasn't Bubby's intent. Two of my favorite sitcoms, The Odd Couple and All in the Family, I got hooked on watching at their house. I got to see the deep love and adoration between Grandma Adele and Grandpa Norman. Of course, like many couples, they could bicker as well. If Grandma told an off-color joke in the presence of the kids, she would shout, "Norman!" and then yell something in Yiddish so we couldn't understand. We learned to play Scrabble, Boggle, and all kinds of card games. Usually Grandma would win. She was a fierce competitor. In fact, years later, when Ariella and I were in that same house in Cleveland, we had both sides of our Reback and Bernstein family with us for Passover. The day after Seder was a beautiful afternoon. Ariella, Danielle, Sheila, and Adele set up a card table on our back porch and were playing mahjong. And Grandma Adele just whipped them hands down the entire day. Perhaps the most important lesson I learned from Grandma Adele was her ability to give the gift of her personal presence. As a rabbi, I marveled at and was inspired by her natural ability to be there for people she cared about in times of joy and in times of hardship. She was a great listener who validated her relatives and friends when they confided in her. She visited people in the hospital, rejoiced with them at their birthdays, and cried with them when they suffered a loss. It is so fitting that these natural things that she was doing her entire life she did in an official volunteer capacity for many years as the Congregation Rudfeit Tzedek Sisterhood Corresponding Secretary, where she modeled for the entire congregation what it means to create a caring, sacred community. Adele was a living, breathing social network long before the digital version of that concept existed. When I was growing up, I cannot think of a single school play, graduation, or time I read Torah in synagogue where she wasn't there and sitting right up front. What a blessing to have had her at all of these events. She has always been my greatest cheerleader, and I think it's safe to say for all of her grandchildren and great-grandchildren as well. Grandma Adele was present for all the significant events in my life, my bar mitzvah, my rabbinical ordination, my wedding to Ariella, and the births of our 3 children. Our son Sam recalled yesterday how especially inspired he was that when she was already 100 and her body was not what it used to be, she got on a plane to Florida to attend his bar mitzvah. That was just 3 years ago. My brother Aryeh recalls additional treasures that Adele imparted. One was the value of expressing gratitude. She was very meticulous about thank you notes. In fact, my father recalls her reminding him to write a thank you note before he even opened a gift. Second are the colorful delights of Yiddish names and idioms, as Yiddish was the spoken language in her home as a child. Among my favorites was her analysis of the differences among 3 different types of individuals who don't, shall we say, have it all together. These 3 characters in Yiddish are Shmegegi, Yachem Flaster, and Schmendrick. Can Google translations after the service. Adele's knowledge of every location, of every single street in Chicago, no matter how obscure, as well as the price of gas and groceries in every single neighborhood, was a remarkable achievement. She never touched an iPhone, but she was a walking app store. My brother Henry recalls that Grandma Adele always called us, her children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, her dividends. She used to say, "I may not be rich, but my dividends have given me more than I could have ever hoped for." Once, when she was a young, spry 98, and traveled up to Deerfield to surprise me, Henry, on my birthday, and one from a couple weeks ago, where she got to spend some one-on-one time with her 6th great-grandchild, Judah Lev. Right before our final visit a couple days ago, Lizzie said to me, "It really is amazing that she made it to our wedding, and a full year later to meet Judah Lev." With apologies to my brothers, one amazing, remarkable achievement of Grandma Adele is that she witnessed the Cubs World Series championship last fall. It took them long enough, but she checked that off the bucket list. With all of the blessings of living to 103, in recent years, she was often wistful in noting that she outlived all of her lifelong friends from her younger years. Yet, she had a knack of making good and lasting friendships across generations. My parents' friends and Barbara's friends became her friends for life. And she considered friends of her grandchildren, her friends as well. I'm honored that my high school friend Fritz Kagi is here. Hopefully he'll be the next assessor of Cook County. I have my grandma's permission. You should all vote for him. She would have gotten a kick out of that. One of Grandma's most devoted friends in recent years has been my sister-in-law, Danielle Reback-Deutsch. Danielle wrote on Facebook describing Adele as a person I have known for the last 19 years who called me her honorary granddaughter, who says we were related not by blood, but by love. Danielle and her family and my son Noam are traveling together on a long-planned camping trip out west. They've been in Yellowstone for the past few days, but as they were preparing to head out west, they visited Bubby Adele last Thursday and were among the last to see her before she slipped into unconsciousness over the weekend. I was so touched to read my son Noam post on Facebook yesterday, a beautiful photo of him with Bubby with the caption, "I am so fortunate to have had the chance to say goodbye to her one last time before she passed away at 103 years old. It's sad that she died, but it's definitely not sad when you see how much a life she lived." In addition to the Deutsch family, Adele enjoyed many other friendships in recent years. She lived in her own apartment in Hyde Park, 1700 building, until she was 98. Even then, she said she didn't want to move into assisted living because she said that was for old people. Yet circumstances required her to do so. And she and our family were incredibly blessed that she moved to the self-help home. On behalf of my family, I want to thank all of the staff and volunteers there who provided love and support for Adele as if she were their own mother. My family is especially grateful to Wally for her special devotion to Adele, making sure that she was comfortable, safe, and intellectually stimulated. All of this, all the things that self-help home provided her, never got in the way of Adele's steady diet of her two favorite foods, chocolate and bananas. We so appreciate the high quality of life Grandma enjoyed for the last 5 years. One final thing. Adele's final decline and death this week occurred in the midst of great turmoil in our country, as we have witnessed ugly hatred, bigotry, and violence. Our nation is wrestling with the meaning of these demons and the absence of leadership to inspire our country to our better angels and highest morals. Adele's legacy reminds us of those sacred values that we received in our Torah so long ago. Ephes ki lo yiyeh b'cha evyon. There shall be no needy among you. Lo ta'ametz et levavcha. Do not harden your heart. Ki patoach tiftach et yadcha. You must surely open your hand and your heart to make this world a better place. Adele Bernstein of blessed memory was a force of nature who opened her hand and her heart to all. Let us learn from her example so that even in her absence, we can emulate her efforts to repair our world. Let us pray in the words of our tradition. Tehi nishmatat tzrura b'tzror ha'chaim. May the soul of Huddle Bat Asher Vebela, Adele Shore Bernstein, be bound up in the bond of life eternal. May she rest in peace. Let us say, Amen. This time I'd like to invite my Aunt Barbara Lowe for some brief remarks.
I was here just a week ago to see my mother. I hadn't seen her for 3 months. And when I arrived, she said to me, "I can die now because you're here, and then you won't have to fly home and come back." And I said to her, "You can't die now. I don't have a dress." So here I am back again, and it's a sad day, but it's a day, it's what she wanted. She was ready. Our family is very interested in theater and music. And for my mother's 100th birthday, I had come up with a song for every decade of her life. And I'd like to share those with you quickly so that when you hear these songs sung, hopefully you will, you'll think of my mother. For the 1910s, the perfect song was Pretty Baby. And if anyone saw any pictures of her as a baby or a child, it's obvious why that was an appropriate choice to represent her early years. In the 1920s, after my mother's mother passed away when she was 6, she spent time living with family in Philadelphia and Chester, Pennsylvania, and she and her father also lived for a time with her Tante Maram. Someone to watch over me represents those years when people helped my mother and her dad. For the 1930s, Cole Porter's You're the Top. You're the Top expresses the thoughts of Adele's many friends at Marshall High School and junior college and beyond. Lil Bard, Gene Pearlstein, Sylvia Drebin, Esther Heller, Henriette Nathan, and many others would have agreed with Cole Porter that Adele was the top. In the 40s, Adele met Norman, the love of her life, and what could be more appropriate than Rodgers and Hammerstein's Love with a Wonderful Guy. One of my dad's favorite songs that he loved to sing to all of us was A Bushel and a Peck from Guys and Dolls. And while his singing voice was not great, and unfortunately I inherited that, the sentiment certainly was appropriate. When my daughter Becky was a junior in high school, she produced and directed a production of The Fantastics. And although this song was originally written in the 60s, Try to Remember captures the essence of looking back and remembering one's life. And by the 60s, Mom had many wonderful memories. For the 1970s, the musical Pippin, one of the best characters, is the grandmother, who was a feisty woman and appreciated and loved life. And the anthem, No Time at All, represents my mother, who, at the age of 100, maintained that she was not old, but older. For the 80s were the times of grandsons and granddaughters, and what song could be better than from La Cage aux Folles, The Best of Times. In the 90s, they made a new Gershwin musical called Crazy for You, and one of the songs from that was They Can't Take That Away from You. And my dad died in 1991, and that song, I think, represents the memories that my mom had with my dad of 50-plus years of marriage. And for the 2000s, from Follies, I'm Still Here. And until Wednesday, she had been through good times and bad times, but she was here until she decided it was time to let go. I'd also like to share with you a quick remembrance from my husband, who was unable to be here today and is flying in tomorrow and will be at the Shiva and will help us straighten out her apartment. Adele, my mother-in-law, brings back many memories, but let me recall just one. The day I met her in September 1969. I just want to say I haven't seen this. This was in a sealed envelope, so who knows what he said. I had moved to Chicago more than a year before, first to work a summer job and then to start graduate school in the fall. That summer was unquestionably the loneliest time in my life. I didn't know a soul in the city. Mondays to Fridays would just work to home to sleep. Weekends, home alone. I met Barbara the following summer. We dated. Our relationship developed. 6 months later, we'd be engaged. 6 months after that, married. As 1969 summer waned, and after Adele and Norman heard about Steve Lowe, some mysterious boy from the East. Their lifelong bent toward hospitality combined, I guess, with the curiosity to invite me for an Erev Rosh Hashanah dinner at their home on 87th Street. What a special day. For me, it was my first home-cooked meal in 15-plus months, and unlike the previous year, celebrating Yontif with the family without having to sit through a long service. The best part, since Barbara and I were only dating, the evening was just meet the Bernsteins, and it co-opted the need for a later, stereotypical and stressful meet the parents event, because when that time came, I already knew them. After 48 years, that evening's details have faded, but it was welcoming and warm, just like every other celebration after Adele and Norman absorbed me into your family. We'll never know whether Barbara's and my relationship would have developed without that reinforcing family dinner experience, but it certainly didn't hurt. Mom lived a very long and inspiring life. Certainly there was no one more deserving of the peaceful rest she now enjoys and the gifts she left for the rest of us. Shalom. Amen.
As our service arcs towards conclusion, I want to make some brief announcements. After the service, the chapel staff will give us instructions for the procession to the Jewish Waldheim Cemetery. After the Kvura, the burial, our family will be receiving visitors today as Shiva begins. For today only, we'll be receiving visitors at the Jewish Self-Help Home on 908 West Argyle in Chicago. And that's, of course, where she resided since 2012. And that visitation there will be from 3:30 to 5. Shiva, the rest of the period from Sunday through Wednesday will be at my parents' home in Hyde Park, 5400 South Hyde Park Boulevard, number C10. And the hours are on Sunday only from 1 to 5 and 7 to 9 with a minyan at 7:15, and then Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday from 7 to 9 p.m. with the evening minyan at 7:15. I want to express thanks to Congregation Rudfeit Tzedek, which is enabling guests to park in the parking lot of the synagogue, 5200 South Hyde Park Boulevard. You can park there and then walk the 2 short blocks to the Hedgerow condominium at 5400, because parking can be a challenge. Also suggested tzedakah, charity, to the Self-Help Home or Congregation Rudfeit Tzedek Sisterhood. At this time, I'd like to call upon my sister-in-law, once again, Rabbi Lizzie Heidemann, to lead us in the Male Memorial Prayer. Please rise.
El male rachamim, shochen v'amromim, hamtze menucha nechona, tachat kanfei hashchina, b'ma'alot kedoshim utarim, k'zohar harakia mazhirim. את נשמת הודל בת אשר ובלה שלחה לעולמה בגן עדן תהיה מנוחתה אנא בעל הרחמים הסתיריה בסתר כנפיך לעולמים וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתה אדוני הוא נחלתה, ותנוח בשלום על משכבה, ונאמר אמן. exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Adele Bernstein, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that she find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life and in the bond of the living, and may she rest in peace. And we all say, Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, the interment service will continue at Waldheim Cemetery. For those of you who will be driving in the funeral procession will be forming in our parking lot. Please obtain an orange safety funeral sticker to place on the right-hand side of your windshield. Have your bright lights and hazard lights on at all times. For additional measures of safety, we will be providing many of the cars with a flag that will be affixed to the top portion of your car. We'll have a car in the back of the funeral procession to hopefully keep other cars from entering the procession. And for your own personal safety, I strongly recommend using your horn liberally as you're going through the intersections. Please do not speak or text on your cellular phone while driving to a cemetery. The procession will be forming on the north side of our parking lot, but the cars will queue up on the south side, but we will be exiting the north parking lot, the north exit. The following people have been asked to serve as pallbearers. When I call your name, please stand next to her casket. Louis R.A. Bernstein, grandson Henry Bernstein, great-grandson Samuel Bernstein, granddaughter Rebecca Lowe Curtis, granddaughter Sandra Lowe, and beloved Dr. Robert Holstein. This time, I invite everyone to please rise and stand in place as we escort the casket of Adele Shore Bernstein from the chapel, along with the rabbis and the family. Then you may return to your cars.
Yoshev b'seter elyon, b'tzel Shaddai yitronam. Omar l'Adonai